Oh, sweet. It is recording now. What's happening, everybody? How's it going? Your boy Ronimus Prime. We got Alan back. We decided to do a quick little one-shot episode for you all. We're gonna talk about blurs and then just what we got planned for the upcoming year. All
Yeah.
right. Want to kick it off, Alan?
Hey, how's your break been for you? I know you did some traveling and shit. How was
Oh shit, I didn't even think about putting that in there. No, I mean it's been good, man. I mean the holidays, life's been lifing. I mean we've all had a lot of things go on. I've had a couple of friends pass, as you mentioned. I've done some traveling, so just life's been doing this thing. But other than that, looking forward to this year. Looking forward to new things, new challenges, new perspectives, and uh, just kind of realigning purpose and intent and mission and everything like that.
yeah? I'm doing some writing, trying to finish up a book that hopefully should be released mid this year. So that's what's kind of keeping me busy, trying to figure out how to promote it. Um, Probably looking to start to ramp up the marketing for that, do a few guest spots here and there, put the book out more, get some test readers on board. Uh, it's gone through the first set of editing stages. The artwork is, I would say, about 50% done. So that's going to probably keep me occupied for creatively for about the first half of this year. So it's that, and if there's any other little projects I could kind of think of, depending on how things kind of flow.
Yeah, creatively, I told myself last year is like you have three things that you're really interested in. Focus on those three things, and that's creatively. That's my focus: photography,
Mhm.
writing, and just studying music and things of that nature. So that's really what I'm focused on creatively. Um, Side note, congratulations! You moved into your new palatial estate there in Barbados. Uh,
Yeah.
how much of the island do you own now?
Yeah, so I just moved. So this is my new spot. So it's kind of cool to have a space to kind of just have my shit, do some podcasts. So hopefully I should be able to be online a little bit more. Um, it's good not to have to pack up shit. So yeah, I've been here since Christmas, and it's actually been pretty good being in a new place.
Yep. Like I said, I did travel. I went to Dallas to visit family and worked out a few things. And then about 2 weeks ago, uh, I was on a cruise through the Caribbean, and so that was fun. Did Grand Turk, which no disrespect to the people, but there ain't shit in Grand Turk. San Juan was cool. Saint Martin, Saint Martin, cool, and then Saint Thomas was cool, except for the tour just being hella unorganized. Other than that, great experience. Um, you talked about having a new space, and one of the things, because I know I can see it in the background, like all the pops and everything. One of the things we said we were going to do is talk more about that pop culture stuff. We want to get into
Mm.
that more,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
yeah. Um, just plain and simple for everybody. We've been very comic book focused, but one of the things we're going to do is start talking about our various collections, showing off our various figures. Uh, Basically, as two black guys who love nerdy pop culture, we're going to start showcasing some of the other fandoms that we like. We're going to get into more of that over the course of this next year.
Yeah. Because a lot of people are comic book collectors, but a lot of my comic book collecting was done in my earlier years. And once my collection, I kind of lost my collection. I never kind of got back into collecting comics. I would read them, but besides it being a space issue, but it was it was just never anything I kind of got back into. But I kind of collected video games, so I have a huge video game collection from PS1 to PS5. Some of the older systems like Super Nintendo, Nintendo. So a lot of stuff I could show, I could speak on because I have tons of that shit.
Yeah. A lot of you guys don't know that me and Alan, we talk quite frequently, and there's so many conversations where I'm like, we should be recording because people would enjoy it. And like we both have a fairly extensive knowledge of video games. I mean, there's certain despite the fact he grew up he from Barbados, I'm Pacific Northwest. It's like there's a lot of things we remember when it comes to video games and whatnot, and even trade publications, PSM, EGM, things like that we have an interest in, and then also we'll do our best to talk about like how we felt as Black people, especially Black people that grew up in two totally different types of places. Uh, you said recently that Barbados became a republic, but for the most part, your youth it was a part of the Commonwealth, right? Or when
It's
did it
still part
become?
of Commonwealth, still part of Commonwealth. And to be honest, being a republic is no difference from being independent. Uh, it's the differences are, I don't want to say they're cosmetic, but it comes down to things like name changes. So you no longer have things like a governor general, you have a president. Uh, Police force is no longer the Royal Barbados Police Force. So things like that on that level. But it doesn't change the money, it doesn't change the constitution, stuff like that doesn't change.
So
Um,
it's kind of negligible.
I don't want to say it's negligible because I'm sure there's someone who's going to say it's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I would say that your day to day life, there's no difference.
Okay.
When it changed over, it didn't. It didn't. Nothing changed for your just day to day life. So you know, there wasn't much of a change there. Um, so the only thing I would say about uh, being a part of Commonwealth or coming up being a country that was more tied to British traditions, um, we still live under America in terms of literally down south. So America still had a lot of influence in terms of television, fashion, food, pop culture, that kind of stuff. Because England is on the other side of the Atlantic, most of the ties there would be from family and relatives that you would have had that would be sending stuff back or you going over and visit. So it's almost being a part of two worlds kind of thing. And that goes for the majority Caribbean. Jamaica, they have ties to people in England, ties to people in America. So, it's almost the best of both worlds in that regard.
Experiencing a little bit of lag, but that's okay. That's okay. Well,
Mm.
it is what it is. But no, I mean, I bring that up because, like I said, we've talked privately, and I've always enjoyed when you've described your experiences, being young Black Barbados under the Commonwealth and how you viewed things in pop culture. Oh my goodness, what was it? Like we're gonna get into, blurs uh, and what that is, and like seeing like how you view like seeing representation of oneself in pop culture media is a little bit different than how we as Black people experienced it in the States. So I've always enjoyed those things. So that's something that we're going to talk about, and we'll talk about it a little bit tonight, but I mean we're also going to talk about it throughout the year. I mean, and what we hope is that for as many things that seem different, you realize there are plenty of things that are exactly the same, like
Yeah.
how he experienced the video game, how I experienced the video game, how you consume information, blah blah blah, things like that. So
What I would say is growing up, what was kind of different was we didn't have the internet. So they didn't have that instant uh, information. So you heard of stuff. Someone would tell you something in the schoolyard, and sometimes you believed it, or sometimes you didn't believe it. You saw someone with something in a magazine. So, you would have heard someone talk about Atari, and they would tell you stuff, and you'd listen, and the person would describe this shit, and they would tell you about this game they played or whatever. And then when you finally get a chance, because they've hyped this shit up so much, you can't believe it's just like squares on a background kind of thing. Or, you know, you go by someone and they have an Atari, it's your first system you ever played or whatever, you know, but it would have been a few years behind people who lived in the first world countries, because the stuff would have taken time to trickle down, or someone would have to travel, and things would have been a lot more expensive also. So that was one of the bigger things, where that information, you didn't have that information, you didn't get that stuff, you kind of heard about these things, and they were almost like these mythical things. I can remember when I first got my Nintendo, it was on a trip to America, and just saved up, and we always wanted this Nintendo. That's when all systems launched at 100 US. So the first Nintendo was 100, etc. So I can remember all of those things growing up, and how that felt and what that meant. And how we actually viewed video games and how we played video games was a lot different too than how we play them today.
Yeah, I mean, there's way different now. And it'll be interesting to see like how you guys viewed games versus how we did in the States. So I said these are things we're all going to talk about, and once again, just talk about if we have anything odd in our collections. Like there's some figures I've been wanting to showcase for a long time. I've shown Alan a while back, like the Sojo figures, Players Kai figures, things like that, things you guys may not have known about. But I want to showcase that because I believe that's all a part of like the Black collecting experience. Um, we're not all homogenous, so it's like we all like different things. And one of the
Mhm.
things we're just to reiterate, we're just going to start showcasing that type of stuff too. So, hopefully you guys enjoy that. But let's go ahead and get into one of the main topics, blurs. There's been a lot of discussion about that lately. Alan, what do you think a blurred is?
Well, so a blurred would be something that would be a newer terminology. It's probably old now, but a newer terminology. That's nothing that we would have heard growing up or whatever. But the long and short of it, it's a black nerd, a blurred black nerd, and usually it's a person who kind of is into pop culture, into video games, anime, uh, certain types of movies, science fiction, you know, manga, that kind of stuff. And what's even interesting too is that even the definition of a nerd is kind of different from when I was younger. So, like being a nerd wasn't something that was cool. So now it is not such a derogatory term as it was when we were younger. So as I said, a blur would just be a person kind of announcing the fact that they are black, and they're also a nerd into anything that would be from board games, card games, video games, you name it. That was a blur.
Yeah, perception has definitely changed. I mean, you were born, was it early 70s,
Uh,
mid 70s,
Mid 70s,
mid 70s? Because you're what, 51 or no,
50 this year.
50 this year. And see, I'm 41. I'll be 42 this year, and so definitely when like being a child of the 80s, 90s, being a nerd wasn't a cool thing, and perception has changed. And for me, like you said, blurred is black nerd. It's a signifier, it's an identifier for when you go into a space, you know, you see somebody. I guess I'm trying to say is like identifying as a nerd when you go into certain, not a nerd, but a blurred, you go into certain spaces, it gives you like an instant comrade. It gives you, you know, just somebody else you can identify with. Because I think oftentimes, while Black people do like pop culture stuff, sometimes they go into spaces and there's not always other people that they can readily identify with who like the same things. And so this gives you, uh, I don't want to say calling card, but yeah, more like a identifier or a signifier, you know, kind of
Mm.
like walk into a room and it's like, I'm a part of this clan and somebody else is a part of that clan. It's like, okay, I know I have a brother at arms here.
Right.
Or if it's a space that a Black person who is a nerd set up and it's like, oh, this is a blurred space, you know that there are other, that's the terminology I'm looking for, other like-minded individuals there.
Yeah.
Um, you know, that are into the same things, and you know it's going to be all good. Um, but one of the controversies, or I don't know, for me, it's not really a controversy, but it's this thing that like blurs, not all, but some percentage, depending on who you are, whether that's a small percentage or a large percentage, like they have a overwhelming desire to have a proximity to whiteness and things of that nature. Thoughts on that?
Uh, that's a kind of tricky question in terms of when you say proximity. Um, that makes you kind of feel as though it's not a genuine kind of thing. In terms of like you just kind of cozying up to it to be a part of a group that really interested in kind of. Um, I would believe that people who identify themselves as blurs, it comes from a genuine place where they actually like stuff. And in my opinion, it doesn't matter what the let's say the cultural significance of what you like. Once it's coming from a place where you're enjoying it for what's intended to be. If you're enjoying it to kind of make fun of a group of people or something like that, that's not quite what was intended. But if you genuinely like, let's say Japan anime, or you like Asian stuff, or you like uh, certain types of movies out of Asia, that kind of stuff. So when I was coming up, anime was something that we only kind of got on videotapes, and we kind of rent or you just borrow a tape. So these movies were worn out. They were interesting because this was something new. This was something fresh. It wasn't the usual Western kind of stuff. So you like that stuff. You generally seeked it out and you enjoyed it. Uh, we never kind of thought of it as trying to cozy up to Asians kind of thing. He enjoyed it. Where we are in the Caribbean, one thing that we kind of grew up on was kung fu films. Everybody kind of watched kung fu films. That was a big thing. In the summer, we just sit on a pile of videotapes and we just watching kung fu's. Whereas maybe where you're from, you probably didn't watch as much kung fu films as we did. I'm not sure, but people like what they're finding entertaining. So if you do like something from right now, there's a lot of people like a lot of stuff out of Africa. Yeah, there's African movies, and I see there are people who like movies out of Turkey, India, Asia. There's because we live in a world where there's a lot more freedom or there's a lot more access to certain things. You're gonna find things from other cultures that you enjoy, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
just like
There,
there are
there's
people in Japan who, so back in the late 80s, early 90s, when Jamaica was really blowing up, one of the biggest fan bases for reggae music was people in Japan. One of the biggest fans of people of Rihanna were people in Japan. So the same way how we like other people's cultures. There are other people who from a different cultures like, oh shit.
Yeah. And then that's kind of how I see it. I mean, and you're not wrong. I mean, there's the globalization of content. And yes, black people did watch a shit ton of kung fu films. From the black exploitation era to the VHS to DVD. Yeah, that's how Wu-Tang Clan got formed. Was they would get together and go watch kung fu films. That's why they call themselves the Wu-Tang Clan. You know, for me, because it's a discussion I've had with a couple of people, and I always say the same thing. I'm like, especially like with cosplay, right? It's like people they want to be a part of what's popular. Like anime is popular. Like, when I was a kid, coming up in the '90s, I was hitting middle school, beginning of high school. Like everybody flocked to Dragon Ball Z. I mean, we were going on Geo Cities. There's probably a good portion of y'all that remember what Geo Cities is, and we were typing in DBZ images, and guys were trying to figure out if they could draw these images or whatever. Like
Mhm.
people wanted to be a part of that it culture. Um, do I think that there is a percentage of people that do it because they want to be more so in proximity to Asian or white culture? Yeah, but to me, it's a much smaller percentage, and even then, it's not as I would say, like a straight percentage. I think there's like out of that, let's say 20%, right? Let's say 10% of those are people that they want to be a part of those other cultures because they truly devalue black culture, and that's probably signet of something that's happened to them. Maybe they just didn't have a strong influence, and then maybe there's the other 10% of that 20% is just they didn't grow up in an area where black influence and culture was strong. um, and we see that sometimes with people. It's like I grew up here. I grew up mostly around, these type of people. So this thing influenced me more, but I don't think it's a vast majority of blurs. I think it's really a lot of people, they just want to be what's popular. And having a blurred space allows them to do that when other spaces say you can't. This blurred space says that I can, and it's welcome there. So that's kind of my take on that. And then something else that I've come to realize is like when we see like whether it's cosplay, the buying of merchandise, it's like you got to look at where somebody's primary fandom is. Like if their primary fandom is anime, manga, and video games, they're going to consume more of that. And it comes the same with like representation. So sometimes when birds talk representation, so you got to look at where their primary fandom is. If it's anime, manga, and video games, that's what they really mean. When they look at comics, it's like you got to take into consideration they're probably comic book casual because it's probably the fourth or fifth thing on their list that they really enjoy. And so when they look at comics, they're probably only seeing like Luke Cage, Storm, the major people. They probably really don't realize there is more than 10 or 12 people they probably don't realize there's 200 plus characters. But it's also taken into consideration it's not that fandom is not high on their list. Their more popular fandoms are anime, manga, video games, maybe Pokemon, maybe Magic the Gathering.
So you're saying, so I would kind of, I would kind of not quite agree 100% because the way how it is yes, there are people who like the people who don't like comic books, the people who don't like video games, the people who don't like certain movies, people who like series, and they're all in the same melting pot, right? Uh, but you know, I still think they're all equal because it's not that they're not aware of. So let's say you said like someone is not aware of the other black superheroes in comic books. It may not be that they're ignorant of the fact. It's just that comic books don't interest them, and that just happens to be the fact. Everything that is within a fandom or something, it doesn't mean the interest is. Okay, I'll give you an example. I appreciate cosplay, but personally, I don't think I would ever do cosplay. Um, I'm not going to, I appreciate really great cosplay. I'm amazed at what people can do and that kind of stuff. But I wouldn't say I'm a super fan of it. So it's not that I'm not aware of this and what cosplay means and what it does and that kind of stuff. It just means that it's just I'm not that interested into it. So there's nothing wrong with that. So I don't think it is a case where, let's say, because people tend to read manga or they're associating with this Japanese thing or whatever, they're not aware that something else doesn't exist. It's that they kind of go with what they like, what they enjoy. That's how I kind of see it.
I mean, yeah, and that goes with what I was saying though. Like, let's say comics, if their primary fandoms are anime, manga, and video games, that is where the bulk of their focus is. Or let's
Yeah,
say TCGs, Pokemon, Magic. That's why I said comics. When they're shouting representation, they're probably looking at
in the
all
form
of
of
the
what they
things.
want.
All,
Yes.
they're probably looking at all of the things, but where they really desire it is in the core
Um,
things that they're interested in. That's why I said like
yes.
comics, and let me clarify. They may not be totally ignorant that there are a lot of black characters. They may not know who all of their who they may not know who all of them are. They may know that there's a bunch, but comics, like their desire to go look with comics, they're basically like comic book casuals because comics is probably their fourth or fifth thing on the list. So
Yeah.
they're only doing like a surface glance. Like they probably are like, oh, we need more representation over there. Like they they're only looking as far as what to use an analogy, like what Mufasa could show Simba. You know what I mean? Like, when he
Mm.
shows him that dark spot, blah, 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 you shouldn't go there. You know what I'm saying? But they're not looking deeper than that. Like they know there's more stuff over there, but it doesn't interest them enough to look deeper. So if it's not at the surface level, they're not looking because it's fourth or it's like the fourth or fifth or sixth thing on the depth chart. Where they really want it is the thing that's primarily in front of them: anime, manga, and video games. And so to me, when I hear them shout representation, like I'm looking at what are you primarily interested in? Like if you're primarily interested in Transformers, you probably want to see more of yourself in that thing, you know. Um something else I was gonna say, but no, that's kind of pretty much it. And if you can't find that, then you find the next like adjacent thing, which is why I think, you know, growing up, when you had like cartoons like Thundercats, people gravitated towards Panther because he was probably the closest thing to an actual black character there was in that show. Same thing probably with, I'm trying to think, the 80s Ninja Turtles didn't have a straight up black character in it. They had some that were supposed to be, but they didn't do it. But yeah, Dragon Ball
That's
Z, huh?
yeah, that's it. That's an interesting thing too because that's something that when we were growing up, when it came to mainly cartoons and that kind of stuff, we never really kind of did that. So like, I only kind of heard about the whole Panther being black and that kind of stuff uh, as an adult and being in certain spaces and people saying that kind of stuff. I knew he had a cool voice growing up. He had a cool, gruff voice, and I always thought he was one of the things I would say for me with the whole Panther thing was when I was watching it, he had a gruff voice. He was the engineer. He was the smartest, and I couldn't understand why he wasn't the leader. And that was just how my brain was working. But it was never a case of putting a race to any of the Thundercats, that kind of thing. Um, But at the same time, it wasn't that we didn't appreciate when we did see a black character in something. Uh, the problem with a lot of stuff back in that time, a lot of the depictions, video games, a lot of stuff coming out of Asia, it wasn't always that flattering. So sometimes it would be a kind of like, I kind of hope they don't fuck up a black character in this kind of thing. So sometimes you would prefer them not to have a black character because it's such a stereotype. You
Yeah.
kind of, yeah, you just was like, yeah, I think you could have just left it out. So, but in terms of coming up and representation and that kind of stuff, I believe in you kind of make your own representation. You build your own representation, and if there is a community that you find that is giving you the representation you want, if you want them to succeed, you have to support them. So, it's kind of funny you hear people talk about representation in comic books or spaces or whatever, but then there are people who do it, but the people don't support them, back them. And support doesn't always mean buying the shit. So support could be sharing, talking about it, even talking to the creators to tell them that they like what they're doing. Continue it. You're doing a good job, or that kind of stuff. So people kind of think when you say support as a creator, you're only talking about money. I would, when it comes to support, I appreciate it more when someone come and talk to me about something I'm a part of or something I've created, be it 10 years ago, 2 years ago, and they say, hey, blah, 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 I really like this character, or I thought this character should have done this and this. Sometimes that kind of stuff just takes me aback. And I'm like, I didn't even think that what he was doing had an impact on someone. So there is a bunch of representation there. And it's just a matter of you finding it, seeking it out. And if it's something, and in every single space, there is some form of it. So if you like manga, there's black manga, if you so wish. But one of the things that I don't appreciate is if a person or a group or somebody's doing something and they've made it for themselves or they've made it for a group of people, you come in and demanding that you change it for you. That's not how things work, if you understand what I'm saying.
Explain further that concept.
Okay, so let's say let's say you're a vegetarian or a vegan, right? If I'm over here and I'm doing my little restaurant and I'm cooking whatever the fuck there's plenty of other places for you to find what you are into. But you shouldn't have to come into my space and demand that I give you a vegan option.
Okay. Is it okay if they ask for it? Because with that concept, like things are marketed towards everybody, and that's the great selling point. Like, oh, this is for everybody.
Yeah, things are marketed.
Then everybody.
There's no, to be honest, right? Things are marketed to everybody, but they're not, because there's no such thing as truly marketing to everyone, because there are too many opposites for you to market. So what people tend to do is either they go to the general average or they go to a niche, right? Because trying to market to everyone is impossible. Imagine trying to do t-shirts in everyone's favorite color. That's impossible. So instead, what you can do is either say, well, I'm going to do t-shirts in the primary colors, or say, well, I'm going to stick to black and white t-shirts because I know there's a large set of people who like black t-shirts and a large set of people who like white t-shirts. But to try to market to everyone, it's a cool thing to kind of say, but realistically, it's not a thing that really happens.
No,
When
and
you
what I
mark,
mean is
Mhm.
like you can look at comics, you can look at cartoons, and we say this is for everybody to enjoy. Not that you're trying to market to everybody specifically, but advertising makes blanket statements like,
Yeah,
you know, we love all the kids, blah blah blah. We love blah blah
yeah,
blah.
but
This
it's not true. But that's a part of it. You just have to be able to realize that it's not true. So let's say I would say, but if you are a person who's truthfully honest, I produce books. I make comic books. My comic books are not for everyone, not because I am excluding a group of people, because it may not be your taste. And at the same time, we are in a society too where, let's go back to the same vegan thing. So let's say no, in my and I decide, you know what, I'm going to offer a vegan option. There's going to somebody who's going to say, if you're not a vegan, you can't cook a vegan meal, or you can't cook a vegan meal in this kitchen. And by all means, it can be right. And so it always, it's always going to be these kind of issues. You can't get away from it. So in my opinion, it's always just best to people have the freedom to read, get what they like. And there's enough stuff in the world that they can find something that is for them. There's always enough stuff that someone can find something that suits their preference. You know what I
can
mean?
they find that thing that's on the equivalent level of the thing that they want them to see themselves in? For
Okay,
instance,
so
if
yeah, explain that.
huh?
So explain that part. Explain that.
For instance, if you say, okay, well, there's if you like Mario, right? Super
Yeah.
Mario Bros, right? And you say, well, there's you want representation of Mario, but you're like, there is if you really want it, there is Black Mario or something out there. Is it on par on at the same level of the Mario uh IP that I want to see myself in? Like,
Okay, but
is that at that level?
okay, so let's okay, good. So whose fault is that? So let's go say, well, comic books. And you say, well, I want black representation in terms of a superhero comic book. I want to see a black superhero. And then someone says, but there are black superheroes in the indie space. But then you say, but it's not on the level of Marvel. It's a case of the person who's creating it, they have to be able to produce things on that level. Uh, and you have to kind of discern what is something that's on the level of Marvel. Are we talking about storylines, quality? Are we talking about art? Are we talking about just popularity? What is it that makes something on the level of something else? So those are the sort of things that you kind of have to look at. Uh, because at the same time, too, the person who you are looking towards getting this representation, they don't do a good job because it's an afterthought. It wasn't something that was done from a genuine place. It was done to kind of stop somebody from bitching in the morning, kind of thing.
I want you to explain that because my thought process is, and like I said, I'm just
Mhm.
I'm just throwing a thought out there. Is like people want representation in the thing that's already there, not in the thing that's trying to get there. But I want you to explain more of what you're talking about, like it not being good or whatever. Explain
Okay,
that.
I give it. Okay, so I guess food is usually a good analogy because everybody kind of understands food. So let's say you want you want a certain dish on a menu because this restaurant is the top restaurant in the area, and you think they should be serving your favorite meal. You can go other places that serve your favorite meal, but you have determined, no, I want my favorite meal from this five-star restaurant. But the chefs, the people there, the clientele, they're not into that stuff. And then they're not trained to do it. So when they do it, it's not going to be authentic. It's not going to be what you really want. But you've gotten what you've wanted from that restaurant. So are you more happy because your stuff is on the menu in this bigger establishment and it's not done so well? Or would you prefer to just take a chance with the smaller restaurant where they're trying and they're coming from a place where they're trying to do what you want better?
Hmm. Okay, so let's see. That's how I respond to that. I mean, I see where you're coming from, like, and I guess this is probably in regards to how people sometimes feel that like Marvel and DC they do things, but it's like it's more of a marketing play. Like, okay, we're giving you this, but we're not putting the effort into it. But I mean, the same could be said about that small restaurant. Like, oh, okay, y'all want representation? This is a money making opportunity. Let's
Yeah,
go ahead and do this. But you you just as fucking bad. The only problem is that I
but
think
then
the
we're
perceived notion
left.
that Marvel and
But then
DC will try a little bit hard, or let me not say Marvel and DC, but let's say major publishers would try a little bit harder.
you're left with the third option, and the third option is you can do it yourself.
I mean, that's true. You could do it yourself, and but if we go that route, if we're going to go that route, that's going to be a lot of things. Okay, you don't like this music. Well, if you don't like this music, you can do it yourself. Then everybody's stuck doing it for themselves. But the reason we ask you to do is because you say this is what you do.
Yeah,
Just
but
this is what
again, as I said, you can't please everyone, and that's why we have different genres, different markets. As I said, I believe there should be representation, and I believe that one of the things that should be the driving force is, so even when I say, well, do it yourself, doing it yourself can be even boiled down to the same supporting something when it's smaller so that when it gets bigger, it's something that you want. It's almost like the older version of what Kickstarter used to be. Kickstarter used to be an idea machine where people came up with concepts and people looked at the concept and said, I want that. I want a can opener that can open human food and cat food. That's a great idea. And they would bang that thing, not because they personally wanted to get it now, but because they thought this would be something that would push can opening into the future. So that's another option. When you see someone who's a startup, someone who has talent, who who's that person with the tenacity to drive, support them. And that is you building up something. Because all of these different IPs and all these different things that we like, they didn't just pop into existence. They started small and they had the support and somebody kind of backed them. Yes, after they've gotten the support, it means that they can kind of jump off and do more and more things. So if I become a creator and I sell 1 million copies, I am more likely to start another IP and sell 1 million copies before another person who started from scratch. So, but it doesn't mean that at some point I didn't start from scratch. Look at the Walking Dead guy, Robert Kirkman. He didn't just pop into existence. He started from the bottom. He came up. Yes, right now, whatever he puts out, it's going to sell like hotcakes. But he's kind of earned our right to be in the position where he is, if you can understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. So then kind of putting this back towards this notion that blurs have a proximity to whiteness or whatever, is it really like you mentioned Robert Kirkman, like if a blurred likes The Walking Dead and they dress up as The Walking Dead, does that mean they want to be white, or do they just want to associate with what's popular? Like I look at it like they want to be with what's popular.
I look at it they like zombies.
Yeah.
I look at it like zombie culture because, as I said, when you come from a place where the majority of the population is black, or you come from a place where the majority of the population is of one ethnicity, color, whatever, you kind of view things a little different. Because when I was a kid, I went to an all boys school, and we used to put on plays. And in these plays, they had male and female characters. But I went to an all boys school, so somebody had to be the female in the play. Saying that to say, when you live in a country where the majority of people are black and we're doing cosplay, they're going to be just doing cosplay of white characters, Asian characters, but nobody's kind of seeing it that way. They're just seeing it as characters because it's a little different. So I kind of stray away from the point, but so that's where, but when you are playing a white character, you're not playing it because you're trying to be white.
Yeah, I don't think so.
You're playing it because you like the character.
No, but that goes because we did kind of stray away from, but I think that's why I said there's like and I just use cosplay as the vehicle, but that's why I said like out of Blerdom, there's probably 20% that probably fit that the proximity to whiteness thing. My opinion, my rough estimate, give or take. And out of that 20, it's probably 10% that it's something fundamentally wrong with how they view themselves, maybe as they say, self-hate, whatever. And then the other 10%, it's probably influenced by where they grew up. They didn't grow up in an area where, like, because you said you grew up in a place that's predominantly black. So it really wasn't an issue. They may have grown up somewhere where black was not a very strong influence. They didn't have it, and they didn't have it close enough to be an influence. So that's why I say it's like 20%. But for the most part of it, I just look at it to circle back, like, no, I want to be what's popular. You can't, the whole purpose we made the blurred space was because other groups said, okay, these characters, your skin is too dark. You can't be this character. But I like this thing. This thing it's not just marketed towards you, it's marketed towards me too. Kind of like Stranger Things. I think it's in season 2 where they dressed up as Ghostbusters, but Lucas wasn't the black Ghostbuster. He was the white one. And they were like, you got to be the black one. He's like, no, I don't. I want to be this one. This is what blurred spaces to me were created for. Now, do I identify as a blurred? No, because I'm me. Goddamn Rodimus Prime. You see the name. That's who I am. I'm me no matter what space I go to. And like I said, it's a conversation I've had. I've had conversations with people that are like, especially around when the young black lady woman, she killed herself due to the online harassment. Like, that's what blurred spaces were partially created for, and it's like
I don't like to hear or see that kind of stuff.
Me neither.
uh, especially from something that is supposed to be fun, recreational, that kind of thing. Uh, People are fragile. People are. We don't know what a person is going through. We don't know what a person makeup is. We don't know what certain things do for certain people. And to drive a person to that point
What's
means
happening?
that would have to
You
sort
good?
of meant a lot to them. So, you
Yeah.
know, that's a really sad situation. And I'm sure it's not going to be the last. And
No. And
it's not.
here was my thought. Um, like, was it gonna be? Was that online harassment was gonna happen regardless of whether that young lady dressed up as an anime character or she dressed up as a black comic book character? Because those people, because the internet has given people license to
Mhm.
do shit without fear of consequence, or at
Yeah.
least the perceived notion of a fear of consequence. So it was going to happen regardless, so it's like it wouldn't have mattered, you know what I'm saying? Like, might as well let that person be what they want to be, and that doesn't mean that like I said, outside of that, maybe that 20% that I mentioned, that doesn't mean that they hate black culture, just because they really liked anime culture. Like, I love being black and I watch anime damn near every day.
Mhm.
I love being black. You've seen it. I've shared pictures with you and the other admins. I was just reading a black art book, where a woman who was a fan of going to art museums and things, and she talked about black art, black artists, and things of that nature, and how we were perceived in art that didn't depict us in chains and things like that. Like, you know, um, I question sometimes, like, if I were to adhere to that notion that, like, that me liking other things gave me or made me want to be closer to being white, like, how does that work? Because, like, my primary fandom is X-Men. I own
Yeah.
more X-Men comics than anything else. Like, do I have this perceived notion to want to be closer to being white? No, it's just X-Men drew me into comics. That's what I like the most, with
Yeah.
black characters in comics being number two. You know what I'm saying? I don't like being black any less. I still love being me. I love being, but I wouldn't want to be nothing else. But this is just my primary fandom. Like, and so that's what I gravitate towards a lot of. You know, rain or shine, do or die, I'm always an X-Men fan. Like, I kind of liken it to this. Given the choice between having Ebon number one at a 9.8 and GSX at a 9.8, which do you think I'm going for? I'm going for GSX. Did that mean that I hated this black character? No.
Yeah.
But this is where my primary interest is.
Yeah.
Not just because
Understood.
of Storm, but because that's what I'm a major fan of,
Yeah.
you know. And because for me, owning Ebon number one I would literally have it for its historical context. Like, same reason why I have Luke Cage Hero for Hire number one. I'm not a big Luke Cage fan, but I got one for its historical importance. You know what I mean? But this right here just has more value to me because this got me into comics. It brought me back in to comics. You know what I mean? I know a lot of people, ASM 194, they would want it because I believe the artist was black. Me, like, that's good, but it's also Black Cat's first appearance,
Mhm.
and that's part of the reason why I bought. That's a big part of the reason why I bought. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I don't
We all
like
have,
being.
we all have different reasons and uh, why we like shit, what we collect. There's tons of stuff, and you know that something too is your taste change over the years. There's a lot of things that I liked when I was younger that I'm
Mhm.
not a big fan of now. There are things I didn't appreciate when I was younger that I appreciate now. So, you know, that's a part of being a person to mature, to learn. Uh, not to be hard and fast in your beliefs. You know, you should be able to listen to reason, and if something is presented to you in a manner that you think about it and you say, you know what, there's some merit to this, you can kind of change. Um, Growing up, my favorite comic book when I used to buy comic books was the Hulk, and it wasn't it wasn't because he was a white character, or it wasn't because he was a green character, whatever. It was just, it was, of all the books, I just like the style of this book. I just like the character. I like the style. I like that it felt, it just appealed to me. Every type of book doesn't appeal to everyone. So sometimes there is a run that you would collect because it appeals to you.
Yeah.
There was a case where there weren't many black characters where I was coming up, and it wasn't that these characters didn't exist. So where I live, we used to buy our comic books in the supermarket, gas station, wherever you saw a comic book. But it also meant the titles were limited. So there weren't at the time. So
You're talking about access.
yeah, so access is what kind of stopped you from buying certain things. But at the same time, if I saw a black superhero, but I opened the book and he didn't appeal to me, or the book looked boring, or the suit looked corny, I'm not just buying it because he's a black character.
Yeah, and that's something else that we've talked about. Like, just because you got a black character, you can't make me like it. Like, because like you said, we all got different tastes. Like you said, some of them they suits are corny. Like, I wouldn't dress up as Tyrock if I did cosplay. Like it looked corny. He may
Yeah.
be an okay character. And that's something that I see. I think sometimes it's one of the nuanced things that's lost. It's like, okay, there's 350 black characters. You can't expect me to like them all. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? That's just it. Like, I mean, I like the X-Men, and Frenzy, she's black. She's not one of my
Yeah.
favorites. You know?
So, because again, when I the characters are my one of my favorite characters that I like that was black in the X-Men was Bishop. And I liked Bishop not just because he was black, but he was pretty fucking cool. He had a gun. He looked kind of cool for the time that I saw him in. Uh, he was when he was introduced, and then he kind of turned up in the X-Men animated series. I was kind of like stoked because you just kind of like to see your character kind of be in different things. So, but Bishop was never really a very popular character, and so there was Bishop. I remember there was a time when Rhodes was Iron Man for a bit, and I kind of when I saw him as Iron Man, I remember as a kid I freaked the fuck out, and it wasn't just because he was black, but it was because I deemed Iron Man to be a cool character. I used to buy Iron Man comic books, so then to see Iron Man take off the helmet and it be Rhodes, I was ecstatic. But at the same time, I was at that age, I didn't understand things like, yeah, these are not things that will stick, or these are not things that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I remember when he became War Machine, that was cool. So I used to tell my friends, and the funny thing with comics was that not everybody had a knowledge of comic books, but not everybody read comic books. So me at school going around telling people, there's a black Iron Man. They was like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But they would listen and stuff but everybody kind of kept a close proximity. That's why the Marvel movies kind of took off, because even though people weren't reading the books, they still kind of had a basic knowledge in their head of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they had a
But
rudimentary knowledge probably
right,
from whatever cartoons they saw growing up, or maybe they read
yeah,
as kids,
yeah,
and that's what they were remembering. I mean,
yeah,
not realizing that a lot of things had changed,
change,
characters had changed.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I fully agree with you. Like, You thought Rhodes was cool because you thought Iron Man was cool. I mean, that's like I like X-Men not because of their at times allegorical nature to racism and prejudice, because I thought they were cool.
Yeah.
Also dispelling the notion that Professor X and Magneto were Malcolm and Martin, or were Martin and Malcolm respectively. That's untrue. Stan Lee has debunked that. And if you actually read X-Men #1 from, what was it, 65,
Mhm.
Magneto was a pure villain. And
Yeah.
this is something I wanted to say. Like a lot of that, I'm gonna make up a term, like this Malcolm Xification of Magneto probably doesn't even start until Uncanny 150, when Claremont, in his own words, started putting Magneto on like this 50 issue redemption arc to
Mm.
not make him a pure villain, but to add depth to his character, to give
Yeah.
him rhyme and reason for why he values Homo superior mutants so much, you
Yeah.
know. But even then, my love of X-Men doesn't come from any of that. It comes from, it was something about them that drew me in and always has, you know. So yeah, I mean, I totally understand what you were saying. And then Bishop, I think also sometimes people need to understand there's black by race and then black by race and ethnicity. And
Correct.
Bishop is Aboriginal, which
Right.
means
So,
racially he's black, but ethnically he's not. I don't
right.
even understand how this is a problem, because both him and his sister Shard since the 90s have been this way. And people
Yeah.
get confused.
So,
Oh, well, in War College he had locks. Like, yeah, people who have that type of hair can have locks, just like people who have that type of hair can have afros.
yeah.
Or
So
that
when I was growing up
thing he
too,
had going.
so there's nothing to about it, right? So things growing up, things were a little different in terms of, see how you kind of really. So I know that he was an Aborigine kind of thing, but that I didn't know that then. I kind of know about that afterwards. Like they did some stories and they did different things, right? Also, the way how things are done, or the nature of how comic books were then. If you picked up an X-Men comic book, you may have read the one before it, but you may not have read the one before that, or you may not get to read the other issue afterwards because there wasn't that kind of collecting. Because if you got to the supermarket and the two issues of X-Men were gone, that was it. Unless somebody's going to take you to another supermarket somewhere else that happens to have books. So you kind of just read things out of order, or you never saw the origin story of stuff. So only there was a time, right? This is before the internet. I remember every couple of years or so, Marvel would do a book that had basically just splash pages of all the heroes and villains, and then their bios next to them.
Yeah, Marvel
So that,
fanfare.
right, so that, and you would just kind of, and it should be like 1 in 5 or so, and you would just kind of buy these because this was the only way you would get to know shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless you kind of had a guy who was older than you that read a lot of shit. Sometimes when I was a kid and I saw Black Panther, I thought he was just a knockoff Batman. Somebody would tell me he's Black Panther, but it didn't mean shit because you didn't have, you read a comic book and you read it there and then, and it had to entertain you there and then. It wasn't so much about backstory and that kind of stuff. One thing I would say was in the 80s and 90s, or the early 90s, when I used to kind of collect, you could jump into a story at any fucking point. The books were that, you know what I mean? You kind of could
Well,
get a book.
so here's the difference, and I think it's not Marvel fanfare. I'm saying I think it's Marvel Age, and every so many years they would do that so that you would get updated bios and all their characters and whatnot. But I think one of the things, like when you were younger, when I was younger, was that editorial did a better job of letting you know how connected things were. Like, for
Yeah,
instance, you take Uncanny, I think it's 129, First Kitty Pride. Spider-Man's in the first like 3 pages of that book. And how he got there, editorial notes would say read Marvel Team Up, whatchamacallit, to understand how he went from
Yeah.
there to here.
Yeah.
So, and when you get around the 2000s, that starts to dissipate a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember being like, wait a minute, how is Wolverine with the Avengers and with these guys? Aren't these events kind of happening at the same time? Like, one of the last times I really saw it happen was when they brought Laura Kinney in, and she was running like the covert ops stuff with X Force, and was also appearing in like Uncanny. And I remember she showed up, she had some bloody clothes, and it's like, to understand how she got the bloody clothes, go read this over here, you know. And that was like 06, 07 ish, or it was between 2006 and 2010, you know. Now you don't really see that type of connectivity unless they're doing a major event, you know. But you also brought up something like, because it goes back to the whole proximity thing. It's like, you also got to look at what people had access to. And I remember telling somebody a couple years ago when I first, because even this whole conversation about blurs and the proximity to whiteness thing is an argument, or not an argument, but a conversation I didn't have until like 2 or 3 years ago, because I just never thought of it. Once again, blurred was black nerd. You a black person who likes nerdy shit. I never thought of it as anything else other than that. But one of the things I remember telling somebody was, you gotta look at what people had access to. Like, I didn't step into a comic book shop for the first time until I was 17 or 18.
Mhm.
Yeah. No. Let's see, because it was O'Leary's Comics when I first moved back to Washington State, or moved. So yeah, 2000. I was 16 years old and didn't actively start going to comic book shops regularly until like 2003. You know what I'm saying? So, like you, my access would have been probably the trades at Barnes and Nobles, or prior to that, definitely as a kid, was what was ever at the gas station. You know, I never, like I said, I didn't start really shopping in the direct market until I was like 17, 18, you know. So sometimes it is about what people have access to, and that can have a major influence on the type of things that they like. You know, once again,
Yeah.
going back to, I want representation for this thing that I like. It's also what I've had probably sometimes the most access to. It's the most thing that's appealing to me. You know, even though I'm shouting this blanketly across all sorts of fandoms, the reality is let's just say comics. Comics are probably the fourth, fifth, or sixth thing on the depth chart. The reality is I really want it in the thing that most interests me. This is where I really want it. Probably anime, manga, and video games, which, let's just face it, like anime and manga is outselling comics by an astounding rate.
Mhm.
Um, by an astounding rate. Plus, manga isn't designed to be collectible. You know, I tell people all the time when these arguments come across, that like a kid can go pick up the first volume of Dragon Ball pretty much for whatever it costs to print it. Not the original like early 80s prints, but just that volume one. You know, a kid can't go really pick up. I mean, I guess if you want like trade paperbacks or whatever, but like no kid I know of is going to go pick up AF-15. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's not. It's cost prohibitive to them. Whereas manga is always like that. Like, manga just stay. You know what I mean? Manga stays in constant print.
Yeah.
Singular comic book issues do not. And I want everybody to be clear. I'm not talking about like American or Western comic book trades, because even those aren't always in constant print. But singular issues of American comics are not always in constant print. Even if they do got 10 or 12 printings, they're not always in constant print. Whereas, once again, One Piece, which has been around for 25 years, some kid getting into One Piece, I mean, we're not talking about reading it on a pirate site. They can go pick up volume one for whatever it costs to buy that
Yeah.
trade paperback. They always have. That's the
Yeah.
only thing that's different. Maybe they changed the cover, but that's the only thing that's different. You know, a
As you
kid
see,
can't,
it's a
a
different,
kid can't,
different marketing, different strategy. It's it's almost like comic books kind of punish you for not collecting.
kind of, in a sense, yeah. And that's not even comic books themselves. That's the secondary market. That's the secondary market. I mean, and that just is what it is. You know what I mean? but the primary way to digest manga, either in like Shonen Jump magazines or the Tankobon volumes, which we know as those like graphic novels and whatnot. Like you said, just different market. Those things were designed to be in constant print, so it makes it easier, it makes it more accessible. That also adds into, I think, the popularity and the desire to be a part of that scene. But anyway, man, look, we're reaching an hour. No, actually, we're at an hour and 10 minutes, man. Let's go ahead and cut this off. Uh, we hope you guys enjoy this episode. It's a bit of a rough episode. You know what I'm saying? We're getting back in the swing of things. But bottom line is, and listen, this is a topic that will probably come up in the future. And like Alan said, like as you go along, your thoughts and things will change depending on, what information you come across. And so we'll definitely come back to it. Once again, we're gonna talk about other things. We're gonna talk about some of those other fandoms because, just talking with Alan, man, like we like a lot of different things, and we want to start showcasing that stuff to you guys. So, hopefully you guys enjoy this episode. Leave your thoughts and everything in the comments, like, subscribe, and all that fun stuff, and take it easy. Peace.
Peace, man.